Good afternoon, Superintendent Christian. Thank you for agreeing to talk to our University of West Georgia students. Most of them are in roles that are school level assistant principals, principals. Some may be central office, but most are in that position. But if you don't mind, can we just begin by you kind of sharing your work history and what led you to this point?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm Shannon Christian. I am in my 29th year in education. So I spent 14 in schools, teaching, coaching, assistant principal, and I've completed 14 outside of the schools. I've been in the district office in various roles in several different school systems. Now starting my 15th year. So I have served in Carroll County Schools, Butts County Schools as the assistant superintendent, and served in Lumpkin County as their chief financial officer. And then I joined Bremen City Schools in 2022 as superintendent.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, if you don't mind, if we'll just start kind of explaining what is ESPLOST and what can the money fund?
ESPLOST is the Education Special Purpose Local Option Sales Tax. It is a 1-cent tax that is approved by taxpayers in the county, and we're able to utilize those pennies for capital expenditures. We cannot use it to offset operational costs. Most of you recognize that school system operational costs, the bulk of them are staff costs, salaries and benefits for almost all school systems in that 85 to 90% range. But then also changing light bulbs, buying new tires, paying for fuel, buying paper and cleaning supplies, all those other things that are operational that we set budgets for on an annual basis. We have to pay for those separately and use ESPLOST for capital expenditures.
Yeah, good. And so you guys have, I know, had a successful ESPLOST campaign and what, 2 years ago, year ago? I can't remember. Year ago. So I think it's probably pretty fresh on your mind. As a school superintendent, obviously, ultimately, you're really the one that is, I don't know if you want to use the word responsible or, obviously it lands in your area of responsibility to have those votes. So did you approved one every 5 years? Is that the cycle that you're in?
That's correct. And we're unique in that Bremen City is actually in 2 counties. So last year we were a part of 2 separate SPLOST votes. The Carroll County SPLOST vote, which we get just a little portion of, and then the greater portion that helps us with our capital expenditures and debt service is the Haralson County ESPLOST. And yes, those run for 5-year terms, 5-year max. You have a time limit, but you also have a cap that is set in the amount of money that we submit and voters ultimately vote on and approve or not. And so you can hit a cap before you get to the end of 5 years, but the ceiling is 5 years.
So it's really interesting about the cap, because I think sometimes people don't understand that, because you have to put that cap on the actual ballot. And so is there a balance that you try to strike? Because obviously you don't know what the economy for sure is going to be doing over that cycle. So, you would love to collect for your schools as much as you can, but you also, if you set your cap too high, it may mislead the voters thinking that's actually the money you're actually going to get. Can you kind of explain that?
Yeah, I'll boil it down to teenagers and mamas and daddies. If a teenager comes to mom and dad and says, I would like to make a deal with you guys. I want to do X work around the house for some money. And ultimately, mom and dad are probably going to like hearing that you want to do some work around the house, but they're going to want to know how much money. And so we owe the same thing to the taxpayers, Dr. Hicks. Taxpayers want to know if we're asking them to vote yes, even if we have a list of things that make sense that we want to do around the house, like we want to replace the roof at Jones Elementary School. We want to buy new HVAC equipment. We want to do all of these things. They will probably agree that those things should be done, but they're going to want to know how much. And so before they open their pocketbooks, so to speak, or vote yes to paying an extra penny every time they go out and buy gas or groceries, they're going to want you to show, okay, well, you said you want to do these things. How much is that going to cost? And so we estimate those costs based on the projects that we submit in our referendum to voters for ESPLOST. And they're gonna see that list of items, and they're also going to see a cost, and that gives them the information that they need to make that decision. And I'll tell you, there are two trains of thought on this. There's a train of thought that listen, we need to keep that cap at a very reasonable number so we don't scare voters, so that it doesn't look like it's too big. And that makes a lot of sense. And then there's another train of thought that, hey, let's set this cap even to an unreachable number. And hey, we've got taxpayers and voters who trust us. We've got some debt service. We have built some buildings that we're going to be paying for, not just for the next 5 years, for the next 10 or 15 years. And hey, let's set this cap high so that we'll collect for a full 5 years. And we'll do the work to communicate to our taxpayers that, listen, if we collect more than what we need for these new projects, we're going to throw that additional money at either A, more debt service payments to pay off the existing debt, or B, that will give us some cushion, because we can't predict necessarily in the next 5 years how much it's going to cost to buy a bus, because buses are so much more expensive than they used to be. Or perhaps we'll talk a little bit more about this in this session if there's time. Construction inflation is one of the highest growing inflationary costs. Eggs and gasoline, all those things seem to be so much more expensive, but construction inflation is comparable, maybe more than anything else, in how much it's gone up. So if we promise a new project, but then 4 years from now we can't afford that project, then we'll lose a little bit of trust perhaps in doing that. And so those are kind of the two trains of thought: set it really low, reasonably low, or set it beyond reach, so that we can still, we've got trusting taxpayers who know that we'll do what's right with that money.
And so you kind of talked about this a little bit, but when you go to, of course, work with your legal counsel on the language on the ballot, not really knowing for sure what you can and cannot do and how specific you need to be, because you, again, like you said, you want to be transparent. But then if you share you plan to do something and there's not enough money, then it becomes a situation where you can't do something that was listed. So what is your approach to that ballot language?
Well, I think that that it's always good to include as many stakeholders as possible. So for instance, when we went through this process last year, we put together some committees, one for each of our schools, with mamas and daddies and business owners and stakeholders who really love Jones Elementary School or Bremen Academy or Bremen Middle School or Bremen High School. Then we also set up some committees for some other specific things: our fine arts programs specifically, our athletic programs specifically. And so get all those people in a room and let them dream about what they want for kids. Quite literally, let's all sit. We don't get to do that very often, and usually when I meet with those groups for the first time, I talk about the Sears catalog. Some of us are old enough to have circled things in the Sears catalog at Christmas time. I literally do that exercise with people, and then talk about obviously we won't get everything we're circling in the series
Mm-hmm.
catalog. We'll then do the work to refine those lists. Yes, we dream big for our kids. We want them to have the greatest things, programs, facilities in the world, but then let's prioritize those lists. So I get buy-in from those stakeholders that way. They also help us advertise
Mm-hmm.
for SPLOST because they're bought in. They really want that 1 cent tax so they can help fund some of their projects. And so furthermore, I will tell you in Bremen, our board just approved nearly $250,000 in new band instruments.
Mm-hmm.
It has been needed for a long time. That initiative started with a group of fine arts stakeholders who said, "Hey, we dream for more tubas
Mm-hmm.
and drums and all of these things, and so we will fail if, when all of those instruments come in, we don't do an intentional job of taking pictures and videos and getting thanks and advertising that you asked for this, you passed a SPLOST, our board delivered on getting those things for you." And so that's important for the next SPLOST.
Absolutely. And you mentioned this, but or alluded to it. Those parents can advocate for you in the community as a yes. And I've never met a superintendent who didn't want the vote to be yes.
Right.
But there's limitations in that, correct?
That's correct. So in my role, David, you've been in this role as well. We do have the authority to advocate for a SPLOST, to make the case as the CEO of this organization that a yes vote is important to get our kids these things they need. We have to be careful how we do that, but we have that authority. It is not recommended, it's not wise at all for us to ask any of our other employees, the other 280 employees of Bremen City Schools, to go out and tell people to vote yes for SPLOST. In fact, we got to be very intentional with our staff to protect them and say that, look, y'all, you are in a public position. Yes, you might like for us to have these things that a SPLOST vote of yes can bring to us, but you don't need to use your business time, your school system time to advocate for that. There are some taxpayers out there paying good taxes who don't feel that way, and
Right.
so we have to be very careful about that.
Yeah. And would you say, I guess the percentages have been pretty healthy. I know the one you guys passed a pretty healthy yes percentage. But over the state, has there been a trend where there's less trust that you've seen in this case, obviously the property taxes, but in the SPLOST and people agreeing that this is a good way to generate money for schools?
Yes, just about any kind of tax is being attacked right now. We were fortunate in Haralson County to have a resounding yes vote, but I will tell you that resounding yes was far greater in the Bremen segment of Haralson County than it was overall. And then also by contrast, the Carroll County ESPLOST vote it passed 55-45.
Yeah.
So it was a narrow win on the Carroll County side. There was a recent, I think, a T-SPLOST for Haralson County transportation 1 cent tax that failed. And so, yes, people are increasingly weary and tired of any and all taxes, and it makes it extremely difficult. And it highlights the point that we need to be as open, transparent, and advertise the benefits of that 1 cent sales tax and what it does for our kids and for our programs and for our schools. We can't we can't think about that once every 5 years.
Mhm.
We need that fresh on our minds all the time. And so, yes, oftentimes in our business, we are advertisers, just like other businesses are. People forget very quickly, and so we make it our mission to keep that 1 cent sales tax reminder out there. I mean, we've all seen driving up and down the roads these signs that say, "Look what your penny did," you know.
Yeah.
And so we need to do that as well as school systems, to keep that strong support for it.
And you mentioned bond indebtedness, and in an ideal world, you could generate everything you need in one cycle. So, if the voters approved you to go into bond indebtedness, kind of like a mortgage, to do something in an ideal world, you could pay all that back in 5 years, but we don't live in an ideal world. So does that give you pause knowing that there is a somewhat of an anti-tax sentiment? And if you're going to do bond indebtedness for 15 years, which a lot of small rural systems have to do, does that give you pause as to what you identify? You're talking about thinking beyond the one cycle.
Yes. And every school system is different. We are very fortunate in Bremen. We have a school system that is not seeing tremendous growth. So we're not in a position where we're playing catch up. We don't have trailers outside, and we just, we're struggling to keep up from a construction standpoint. There are school systems that deal with that consistently, but also being small and collecting. I mean, we have a healthy ESPLOST collection. We collect about $3 million a year, so 15 over 5 years. We cannot build a school for $15 million. And so if we were to, for instance, build a new Jones Elementary School today, it would likely cost us 30 to 35 million.
Mhm.
That is more than even 2 ESPLOST cycles can accommodate if we threw every penny at it. And so we have to look at a lot of factors. What will the state give us if we're going to construct a new school? How much will we collect? How much of our collections are already going to pay outstanding debt somewhere else? How much of our collections do we set aside for capital expenditures throughout the year? If we have an HVAC system go down, that can be paid through operational costs. But if we have an aging building and we're experiencing 4 or 5 or 10 HVAC units going down a year at $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a pop, we would much rather use ESPLOST, because we're eligible to do so, to buy the equipment for those replacements. So a good portion of that money is already spoken for. And so we do have to think about in this world of public education and public finance, counter to what Clark Howard says, and honestly, what we know is true when we're sitting around the dinner table, moms and dads. If we want to replace a roof, in an ideal world, we save up enough money for that roof and we pay cash so that we don't have interest. Well, we cannot save up $30 to $35 million to build a new elementary school. If we could save every penny over 3 ESPLOST cycles, then hypothetically in 15 years we could build that new elementary school. However, the rate of inflation for construction I alluded to earlier would not allow us to build that $30 to $35 million elementary school in 15 years. Here's an example of why. I built a new gymnasium in Butts County for Jackson High School. It opened in 2015. That gymnasium cost us just over $160 per square foot to build. 10 years later, fast forward to today, school construction costs are about $350 to $400 a square foot. So that gym would cost us double in 10 years. apply that to the $30 million elementary school. We've saved every penny for 15 years, and then all of a sudden we only have half the money to build that $60 million elementary school. It actually makes more sense to secure a better interest rate, a good bond sale when the market's right, and borrow money and pay it back as we go at today's construction rates than it would be to save up and build it in 15 years. You cannot save money fast enough to outpace inflation.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that. It would actually cost you more to wait that long a period of time, assuming that it goes at the rate it's been going. So some of us are old enough to remember a $50 million high school was state of the art.
That's right.
And those days are long gone. That's probably not coming back. But you talked about the sharing of the SPLOST. So in one system, it sounds like you're FTE. You base it on FTE, but in another system, it doesn't sound like it's FTE. Can you so you sit down and do you talk with other superintendents well in advance, or do y'all work together in any kind of capacity?
Yes. So there's a negotiation there. So in Carroll County, there are 3 school systems represented by Carroll County: Bremen City, Carrollton City, and Carroll County Schools. And we're the low man on the totem pole. We have the fewest number of students who are being served in comparison. And so we have the worst hand, so to speak, when we're sitting around the poker table. But there is a negotiation process between the 3 superintendents. And obviously we're not on an island. We're often in that room doing the negotiating, but we've got boards of education behind us who are helping to guide us and who we have to do. And so ultimately that negotiation determines what percentage we receive of the whole of splitting that penny, so to speak. And so for Carroll County, we get 2% of every penny. And that does represent a greater portion of the whole of FTE. And so at this time, that is a fair amount. We wish we could get more. There is a case or cases to be made that what is generated in Bremen City, Carroll County, far exceeds that 2% in overall SPLOST revenue. Nevertheless, that's what has determined that percentage shared between the 3 of us. And then in Haralson County, we have agreed between Bremen City Schools and Haralson County Schools to use FTE. So the students, as reported to the state, and that's represented in terms of FTE, full-time equivalent students. That shows up on our allotment sheets for Haralson County Schools and Bremen City. And so we are roughly 40%. We're serving roughly 40% of the Haralson County students. And so we get 40% of a penny on the Haralson side, and Haralson County Schools gets roughly 60%.
Right. And let me ask you that too. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. So I know it's been brought up, legislators and others have brought this up, that, we should let schools decide how they use that penny. So why can't we just say they can use it for operations? You were talking about how you can't use it for operational funds, salaries, and so on. What is, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot,
Sure.
What is your opinion about that?
Well, my opinion is that we should not do that. Frankly, we all know this, that the taxes you pay as a homeowner, the greatest portion of it go to schools. And while that funding mechanism might be strained, it might not work as fairly as it has in decades prior, it is the way we fund our schools locally. And so it is very much under attack. And my opinion is if the legislators allowed us to use our 1 cent tax that we allocate for capital improvements, then there will be a tremendous amount of pressure for us to basically use all of those funds, or a great majority of those funds, to offset operational costs, to pay salaries and to buy light bulb replacements and cleaning supplies and all those things. And then we'll find ourselves in a place once again, much like Alabama was not too long ago. 20 years ago, Alabama was in a really, really tough place with their facilities. They were, mamas and daddies were having to send toilet paper to schools, or they weren't going to have them in bathrooms. If we remove that mechanism that has made Georgia facility construction and renovations and maintenance be so successful for so many years, then I fear that we'll be stretched to do anything for our kids moving forward in that capacity.
Yeah, and I just know, and I know you've seen it too. Just as an aside, if you go to Tennessee or you go to Alabama or you go to some of the not all the states, but some of the rural southern states, the type of schools that we have in Georgia, that for the last 30 years or more, actually maybe a little more than that now, is dramatically better than, or that's been my observation in terms of, the quality of the facilities, all the different things that we can provide to our students. And so, I know there's some outliers with Taj Mahals, but I think more than that, you've seen quality schools that are updated and safe for our schools. So as we finish, Mr. Christian, thank you so much, by the way. This has been very helpful for our students, helpful for me too. If you had advice for somebody that really just, maybe one day they want to be, you were in finance, I know, facilities somewhat, I think a part of that, all of it kind of overlaps, but what advice would you give to aspiring leaders that want to work in the central office or want to be a superintendent one day, to educate themselves on these important topics like ESPLOST?
Yeah, ask a lot of questions. I've always been inquisitive. I'm just a big old kid, I think, and I remember my first years teaching. I would stick around, the school business. Like, I wanted to figure it out. I took my toys apart when I was a kid because I wanted to figure out how it worked. Get in and do the work and figure out how things work. Ask the questions. Be involved in things that are not your responsibility, even. So you'll have a better understanding of how all of these parts and pieces of school systems fit together and how they impact one another. I was very fortunate to wear many, many hats. I've never worked in a really, really large school system. Certainly, Gwinnett's our largest in Georgia. And there are some things that I've never learned because of that. But I will tell you, being in small school systems, several of them in a medium-sized school system in Carroll County, I have had an opportunity to be responsible for and learn so many aspects. And so do that, and don't be in a hurry. Maybe it's a blessing, maybe it's a curse. I've never known what I wanted to be when I grew up. And so I've never had this ladder that I knew in my head that, hey, I want to be this by this age, this by this age. I want to be a teacher for X years. I want to be an assistant principal for X years. I'm just not built that way. I've taken, I've not shied away from new opportunities when they've been presented to me, but at every stage, even before getting into education, I've just wanted to be the best at what my job was. And so don't get in too big of a hurry. Life is short. Learn all that you can and be the best you can as a teacher, as a coach, as a school administrator. You do those things, and quite frankly, people will tap you and want you to move quicker. And maybe sometimes that's the right move, but soak it in, enjoy it. Year 29, it quite literally feels like just yesterday that I was driving a school bus, teaching special ed to 8th graders, coaching baseball and softball, and cutting grass and starting a new family. Y'all, it goes by quickly. And so this is the greatest profession. I didn't know I wanted to be in this profession. The Lord put me here, and I'm mighty happy He did. And it's good work, y'all, and it's something to be proud of when that retirement does come.
Which is great, by the way. For all the toil, the TRS is definitely the reward at the end. So, Superintendent Christian, thank you so much for your time. This was very informative, and appreciate that advice at the end. I know our leaders around Georgia appreciate that as well. And thank you so much.
Dr. Hicks, your students have a great professor. I admire you, sir, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you.